Many of you have started to reach out to me privately. Thank you very much. So for those of you who actually are really struggling and looking for help, totally connect with me. Let's set up a call and we see how I can help you. A few of you have already done that. Thank you. And with some of you, we've already started sessions. I wrote down the main areas, right, that everybody is so far noted to me in the private messages what they're struggling with. They are as follow: negative self-talk, excessive or intrusive thoughts, general anxiety disorder, many of those there, chronic fatigue, depression, uncontrollable anger, some rage, many of you dealing with loss and grief, and then some dealing with chronic isolation and toxic trauma bond relationships. All of these things have one thing in common. Can you guess what that is? Pain. Okay, this is the obvious. It causes an enormous amount of pain and suffering because it destabilizes our life, our day-to-day basic life. Other than the pain itself, because the pain is really, it's a somatic, it's a body experience. It has something very special in common in our minds. All of these things cause overwhelm. Ironically enough, the one side effect that is across the board for trauma, in my experience, both in my personal life, right, that I have experienced, as well as with everybody that I've worked with over the years, trauma causes an extraordinary amount of overwhelm. The reason it causes overwhelm is because really we're a two-sided system. A human being is a two-sided system. We've got the brain and we've got the nervous system. Now, the brain in its essence is designed to process the information that's received by the nervous system. What trauma experiences do is the intensity of the experience is too high. Because it's too high, your brain can't logically translate this experience into a narrative that makes sense for you. And if you can't explain what you're feeling because your body is in panic, then you push it away, you shut it down, you avoid feeling it, you hide away from it, you suppress it. So for many of you that I've already spoken about, we had this conversation. For the rest of you watching this right now, that feeling that you're feeling, that's making you completely feel like you're broken, like you're empty, like you're lost, like you can't control your emotions or your anger, that feeling that you're so sad you don't even want to eat. That feeling is the overwhelm that your mind is experiencing from this monumental task of feeling the feelings that your nervous system is trying to send to your brain. In essence, all trauma has this in common. Now, obviously, there's individual treatments and modalities and interventions as well. But for the purpose of this video and to try and help all of you together, I broke it down into I was about to say simple, but it's not really simple. 2 steps. Let's stick with I broke it down into 2 steps. In essence, this overwhelm causes us to not have access to our bodies. So it traps us in our mind. Many of you, I know, are intimately familiar with this phrase, being trapped in your mind. And if you're trapped in your mind, then obviously you don't have access to your body because it's a loop, right? It's a perpetual cycle that you repeat over and over and over again. We try to manage our thoughts in order to get some remnants, some little snippets of control over these feelings that our body is experiencing. But trying to control our thoughts, it doesn't work. Because how do we try to control it? we control it through force, right? This is really what control is in its essence. Like, it's something that is applied. We avoid it. We avoid thinking what we associate as these negative thoughts. We avoid thinking what we associate as the bad thoughts, because these thoughts trigger me. I'm afraid of them. Because I'm afraid of them, they're going to cause my body to re-experience this fear, this feeling that I'm already terrified of. So why the hell would I voluntarily think that thought that I know is going to cause my body to go into the state of panic? Again, it's normal, right? It's part of your conditioning. We're conditioned to move away from pain. We're never taught that the way of processing pain is going into it. This is something we have to learn as adults. So how do I control my thoughts? The simple answer is you don't. You don't control your thoughts. Our minds, it's an automated system linked to so many neural connections that if we try and control that, if we try and inflict a voluntary force upon that, it's like water where you try and stop the water and it just finds another way through. Our neural architecture works exactly the same way. So where does that leave us? Ironically, we learn how to control it by learning how to not control it. We learn to become aware of what we have already become used to doing. So we become aware of our thoughts, in essence. We become aware of everything that we are afraid of thinking, everything that we refuse to think, everything that happens inside of us that we are avoiding. This is the very first thing. There's 3 specific ways that I have been teaching all my clients at the beginning of all of our work. 3 tools that they can use to learn to become aware of their own internal thought processes. The very first tool is learning the difference between reacting on the one side and responding on the other side. Listen to that again, because you've probably heard it a gazillion times. It's all over the internet. But have you really thought about it before? Have you? Reacting versus responding. One of my favorite quotes was by a guy called Viktor Frankl. He was a scientist, a neuroscientist and a psychologist that happened to find himself in a concentration camp in the Second World War. He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And one of the lines in this book goes, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom, right? So choosing how we interact with our environment really is what Frankl is saying. Well, this is what freedom is. This is what true freedom and growth is. A reaction is automated. A reaction is a behavior that the more my body is practiced this particular reaction, this instinctive reaction, it becomes a habit. It becomes habitual. Think of it like professional athletes. They practice over and over and over and over and over again until they don't have to think about it anymore. It becomes a reactive behavior. Now, the same thing happens with our thoughts. If we observe specific environments, especially if we experience trauma during our lifetime, the thoughts that we construct in order to protect ourselves from re-experiencing this pain, those are self-protective thoughts. And initially the intention behind these are really pure, it's to protect me. The problem is we repeat them for years, sometimes for decades, sometimes for half a century. And the oldest person I've worked with is really deep into close to a century. And these things can carry over year by year by year by year. The point is, until we become aware that we have the choice to respond instead of an automated reaction, we're slaves to our behavior. So the very first thing is hit Google, and check what is the difference between reacting and responding. And then you plant that little seed in your minds. And as you walk around in your day-to-day stuff, you choose how you're interacting with your environment. Choose what do you say. Choose the words you speak. Choose how you behave. Okay, choose. Choosing means you're responding. If it's automated, it's always going to be a reaction. That's the first thing. The second thing is very deeply rooted into something that causes so many problems that I don't really have to explain how much, right? But you'll know. Expectations. How many problems does expectations cause? So the second thing is learning to expect less. How the hell do I learn to expect less? It's not like I can just press a button in my head and I go, okay, Marcel, from this moment forward, you are going to expect less. I don't think it works like that. How do we do it? We learn to expect less through first becoming more aware of what I already expect. Okay, so we always start with where we are. We become aware of everything that's going on inside us now first, right? We can only start from where you are. This is where that quote, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. That's where it comes from. So figuring out how do I expect less from my environment and from myself requires an awareness to be cultivated around your current expectations. So how do you become aware of your current expectations? You write them down. You write them down. As you catch yourself thinking, I just expected that. I expect this from myself. I am supposed to be this. Anything that has a I am supposed to be, they are supposed to that. You were supposed to this. Those things are expectations, projected conditional behavioral requirements that come from conditioning. Find your expectations. And as you find your expectations, you'll become more aware of how you project them. Now, if you link find your expectations with practicing to respond instead of react, what happens? It means now I'm aware of what I usually expect, which 9 times out of 10 was probably an automatic reaction. But because I've practiced to respond now, I can respond differently and maybe still be aware that I have the expectation, but change my corresponding behavior or verbalization or articulation. The third thing is common sense. When common sense is a commodity, as, as you will know, common sense is rare. All of this overwhelm in our minds, it comes because we're repeating the same information. So a direct access way in order to minimize and to stop this loop of repeating information is we need to get new information in. So what is the simplest way to get more information into our brains? We practice listening more than what we speak. This sounds easy, but it's not. This is why we have to practice responding versus reacting first. Okay, because the better you get at learning that I just wanted to, but I didn't because I was aware that I was going to, and then I decided, okay, I'm going to respond different. The more you and the better you become at doing that, the more information you can actually absorb, the more information you can perceive. Now, I like to look at it in a very practical kind of a way. Look at just your face. Right, how your face is designed. We've got 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 mouth, 1 nose. So by design, we can say that we are made to listen and look more than what we speak. Okay? Otherwise, we would have 2 mouths, 1 ear, and many people walk around like that anyways. So practice to listen more than what you speak. Now, why? Why do these 3 things? We do these 3 things because it's really important for us to become more aware of our internal cognitive processes. The more we can become aware of the internal cognitive narrative, the more we can start to recognize the patterns. So that's why the more we become aware of our thoughts, so that means not running away from them. That means not avoiding them. That means not pushing them away or suppressing them. That means actually looking at them. You have those thoughts so many times already that you don't realize that you've become used to being afraid. Okay, but afraid of what? You're afraid of being afraid. This is usually the pattern. So we become so afraid of being afraid that we forget that we actually can do something about it. So this is the first part, the cognitive parts of this process. Secondly comes the somatic parts. Now, unless we have this bit of space in our minds, it's very, very difficult to be aware clearly of the sensation, of the affective nerve sensations that our nervous system transmits to our brains. Now, this is just a complicated way of saying it's difficult to be aware of what we're feeling. But really what a feeling is your nervous system sending information that your body is perceiving internally up through your spine, through your vagus nerve up here, through your neck, and it plugs like that into the back of your brainstem here, and then the processing starts. Becoming aware of what you're feeling requires cognitive processing, not only ability, but also processing space. That's what those first 3 exercises are about. In order to start to get access to our feelings, now we need to start using this little bit of space that we cultivated. And I don't mean little bit of space as in a negative thing. I mean, our brains are extraordinary. Right? The processing capacity that we really have blows my mind. It really does. So it's a slow process to learn how to get access to that. Because the more we learn all of that information, every now and again we go through processing phases where we recategorize everything in large volumes. It gets compressed. Right? For those of you who know about computer language, they get compressed, right? And if you look at it like bin files, they get put into bin files. Those bin files gets categorized into library folders, and then it makes brand new space open. So this is exactly how our brain works. How do we get access to the feelings? You use this space. What do you use this space for? You use this space to investigate what you are afraid of. Why did I become used to not feeling my feelings? What happened that scared me so tremendously that I became used to being afraid? What happened in my life that was so terrifying that I never ever want to re-experience that? Now we're really starting to go into trauma experiences itself. And this is not everybody wants to do this. Okay, so this is not a have to at all. Right? This step is not everybody likes to go into their life and to look at the things that scared the shit out of them. Okay, this is a difficult process. If you're watching this and it makes you uncomfortable, then it's okay. Okay, you don't have to do this at all. You don't have to do this. Listen to the video. I'm not saying that this is what you have to do in order to get better. Listen to this and you can just continue on with the next step. But for those of you who are willing to go into your life, look at the thing that scared you the most in your life. Okay, and quite often it is something that happened in our childhood. So for me, for instance, I had, and I still have, right, full transparency, I have a fear of conflict. The reason I have a fear of conflict is because there was extraordinary conflict in my childhood and in my adolescence and in my adulthood. All right, it's only the last couple of years really that it's subsided. But I'm afraid of it because I've experienced a lot of it. Okay, now I did learn how to deal with it and I did learn how to manage it. And I am on a scale of 1 to 10, I was really at a 1. Now I'm maybe a 7, sometimes an 8, in my ability to deal with it and my ability to not let it affect my nervous system and my cognitive processes, and therefore my ability to be a healthy human being. But this is my personal example of go into your life to see what is the thing that you're very, very scared of. Now, I was scared of conflict, right? Terrified of it. Now think about how does that apply in a relationship, for instance. Every single time in my past where it looks like there might be a fight in my relationship, I immediately went into defense and started defending myself. That's not healthy for a relationship. Okay? It's not healthy for a relationship. Doesn't have to be a partner relationship. It can be a parent-child relationship. It can be a sibling relationship. It can be a close friend relationship. It can be a work colleague relationship. I've seen it so bad that even a stranger looks fucking just wrong at you and there's conflicts. Okay, but in essence, this is how you figure it out. You ask the question, what is this thing that I've been afraid of originally, right, for such a long time? Once you've identified that, there's a tool by Christopher Germer called mindful self-compassion. I mentioned it before in one of the videos. In essence, what it looks like is you take that sentence of that thing that you are so afraid of and you add, and that's okay, behind that sentence. So in my example, it would be, I am very fearful of conflicts, and that's okay. It's hard to say. Okay, it's really hard to say out loud. But this is the power of it, because I'm not keeping it inside. Okay, so I would like you, if you're up for it, to say the same. I am experiencing extreme grief because I lost someone close to me. And that's okay. Doesn't feel okay, but that's okay. It's hard. I can't control my anger. And that's okay. Please believe me when I tell you this works. It's very hard to articulate those words, but it causes this beautiful cognitive relief where we just say it, because that's the truth. You know, this is the thing that's inside you that is still causing so much turmoil and hurts and pain and fear. We can't do anything about it if we don't acknowledge its existence. This is part of the whole problem. We try and avoid and ignore the fact that it's there. Okay, if you keep ignoring it, you can't do anything about it. Follow those first 3 steps, which will give you some clarity and some processing space. Use that space. Look at this thing that you've been afraid of all of your life, only if you want to, right? Otherwise, skip to the next step. And then you put that into this mindful self-compassion construct. I feel like this, and that's okay. And do that a few times. Work it into your day, in the morning when you get up, and at night before you go to bed. So this is the very first part of the somatic. How do I get used to feeling my feelings parts? The second part is exactly the same as how we get used to our expectations, but it's really to do with your nervous system. So you start tracking your triggers. Okay, listen to that again. You start tracking your triggers. Now, what I would suggest for all of you really is, I mean, I like Excel, okay? You can set up an Excel spreadsheet, or you can just take a pen and paper, right, in a book, in a diary, in a journal, anywhere like that. You will, most cases, because this is the beginning of an investigative process, really, most cases you will only realize upon reflection. After you got triggered, you will realize that you got triggered, and that's okay, right? That's totally okay. Remember, you're starting. But once you become aware that you were triggered, I want you to write down the date, the time, what triggered you, very important. How did you feel? How did you experience the internal environment, the internal reaction, right? What happened in your minds? Did anything happen in your mind, or was it complete blank? What do you remember about what you felt while you were triggered? So what triggered you and how was the experience? And then thirdly, what did you do? Okay, what was the behavior, the behavioral reaction that came from this being triggered? So once again, start tracking your triggers. Number one, when did you get triggered? Time, date. Number two, what triggered you and what was the internal experience like? What did you think? What did you feel? Number three, what was the behavioral reaction? What was the behavior? Start monitoring this. Okay. What you're going to find is over time, the time frequency between when you get triggered and when you calm down is going to become less and less and less and less and less. And it really is because you create an awareness of I am experiencing this. So as an example, you might in the past got triggered. Well, I can use myself. A long time ago when I was still going through all my shit, sometimes I would get triggered and it would take me a couple of weeks before I was able to regulate back to a calm state. A couple of weeks. This is how bad I was with all my shit. Then I started tracking and I started monitoring and I went through all of these steps. This is how I figured it out. And now I'm helping people with this, right? So I know this stuff works. Eventually, the frequency went from a couple of weeks to a couple of days. Then it went from a couple of days to a couple of hours. Then it went from a couple of hours to a couple of minutes. Now, it is really, I can see most of the time, not always, okay? This is really, really important. Our ability to manage our trigger behavior depends on a healthy lifestyle. So you have to look after yourself. You have to eat properly, not a lot of processed shit. You have to look after your sleep. Super, super, super important. You have to spend time outside and you have to take a break, right? You need to get away from all the shit that fucking causes overwhelm in you as well, at least for a couple of days. Basically, start tracking your triggers. This is very important. So the part after this is just what I said, lifestyle management. The way that our ability to remember all of these things work is really energy dependent. It depends on the amount of energy we have access to. And if we don't look after ourselves, then we really don't have access to enough energy to implement these tools. Right? We don't have enough energy to remember these things at all. Okay, so the very first thing on that spreadsheet or on that book where you're tracking your triggers, starts tracking your sleep. Okay, if possible at all, try and get at least 6 or 7 hours of sleep a night. This sleep is really when our brain, it recuperates, it rests, it categorizes, it consolidates all of the information that we perceive during the daylight hours, right? During our waking states. This is when our brain makes sense of all of that information and processes all of that information. So if we don't rest enough, there's no way that we're going to have a healthy thought system or a healthy nervous system at all. Secondly, diet. Diet is quite important. As a general rule, the less ingredients, the better. It's just as it is. More ingredients in something packaged, anything wrapped in plastic, probably a ton of preservatives in there to make it last longer. A lot of different food grades, colorants, and artificial sugars, and artificial flavors, and stuff like that. All of those things really mess with our chemistry. Especially our digestive system is incredibly sensitive. And majority of the actual neurochemicals that our brain release to make us feel good, healthy, positive, calm, they actually get manufactured in our guts. So what we eat is very, very important. Spend time outside. Okay, this is really important. Spend time outside where you don't just look in front of you like this. Become aware of how you use this sense. When you're outside, look into the distance. Look far away. This tricks your brain to process information at a different tempo. It tricks your brain to release dopamine. Okay, so if you can try and find somewhere in your area that's relatively high up, where you can actually see the environment, you will feel better, right? You will feel better. Lastly, when is the last time you took a break? Okay, when is the last time you went away for a day or a weekend? When is the last time you took a break? When we are stuck like this, it's like we get amnesia, right? We forget about life and being alive. We go into a state of perpetual existence. But existing is not being alive. Okay, existing is existing. Existing is feeling the same thing, the same state. We're alive. Okay, and what makes life amazing for us is the fact that we can feel. This is what makes life amazing. Yes, the trauma experiences we go through makes us fearful of feeling. But if you want to know how to change that, the answer lies in learning how to feel feelings that you have become afraid of. Okay. If you have any questions, send me a direct message. Okay. Take care.